When someone who avoids emotional closeness loses a person who was truly loyal to them, the world does not hear the sound of their heartbreak, but it is there. It just lives in the quiet. Avoidants don't fall apart publicly. They don't cry on the bathroom floor in front of friends. They don't post their pain anywhere. Instead, they swallow it, tuck it into the corners of their mind, and pretend it never happened. But the truth is, the loss of someone loyal, someone who saw their good even when they hid it, cuts deeper than they ever let on. Avoidants grow up learning one thing very well. Don't need too much. Don't depend. Don't trust people to stay. So when someone finally arrives who loves them with patience and consistency, it feels both comforting and terrifying. Comforting because they finally feel safe. Terrifying because safety feels unfamiliar. And when that loyal person eventually leaves, after too many mixed signals, too many walls, too many moments of emotional distance, avoidants experience a pain they believe they don't deserve to show. They don't talk about the guilt that follows. They don't say out loud that they replay conversations late at night wondering why they couldn't just say what they felt when it mattered. They don't admit that they scroll through old messages, not because they're stuck in the past, but because it's the only place they ever allowed vulnerability. They don't tell anyone that part of them hopes the loyal person will come back just one more time so they can get it right. But another part of them is convinced they aren't capable of the kind of love that person deserved. And perhaps the most heartbreaking truth is this: avoidants often realize the value of loyalty only in its absence. While the world thinks they're unbothered, they're actually fighting an internal battle. The desire to reach out versus the fear of being seen. The longing for closeness versus the belief that closeness ends in pain. The regret of pushing someone away versus the habit of protecting themselves through distance. But here's the part they rarely acknowledge. Even to themselves, losing someone loyal is usually the first moment they recognize their own emotional patterns, not as protection, but as self-sabotage. It's the shock that wakes them up. It's the silence that confronts them. It's the loneliness that teaches them that independence without connection isn't strength. It's survival mode, and survival mode was never meant to be a permanent home. The pain avoidants hide is real, but so is their capacity to grow. And sometimes the loss of the person they thought would never leave becomes the moment they finally decide to show up differently, for themselves and for the next heart brave enough to love them. When an avoidant person loses someone loyal, their pain doesn't disappear. It simply becomes invisible to everyone else. They don't show it, not because they don't feel it, but because feeling deeply in front of others has never been safe for them. So their heartbreak takes on a quiet shape. It lives in the pauses between conversations, in the way they sit alone at night staring at nothing, in the space between who they pretend to be and what they actually feel. Avoidants learn from a young age to manage emotions by shrinking them, by pushing them down before they even have a chance to surface. So when someone loyal walks away, they slip into that familiar pattern with almost no effort. They look fine. They act fine. They continue with their routines as if nothing meaningful has been lost. But inside, the emotional weight is heavy, real, and often overwhelming. Their silence doesn't represent a lack of care. In fact, it often means the opposite. The more someone meant to them, the deeper the internal struggle becomes. They replay moments where loyalty was shown to them so clearly that it almost frightened them. They remember the times they felt seen but didn't know how to acknowledge it. They feel the sting of every missed opportunity to speak openly, every moment they chose distance over connection, every time they acted unbothered when what they really wanted was closeness. But instead of expressing any of this externally, they hold it inside, sometimes blaming themselves for not being able to show up in the way they wish they could have. Avoidants also tend to internalize heartbreak differently. They don't usually process pain through emotional expression, they process it through withdrawal. They create routines that keep them busy, distractions that numb them, and behaviors that help them stay far away from the vulnerability they're afraid will swallow them whole. Yet beneath the surface, they experience the quiet ache of knowing they lost someone who didn't give up easily. The loss of loyalty hits them harder because loyalty is rare to them. They don't trust many people enough to let them close. So when someone truly loyal leaves, it disrupts the identity they've built over time. They have to face the emotional truth they avoid, that even their strongest walls don't prevent heartbreak. They only hide it. And perhaps the most misunderstood part is that avoidants do care painfully, deeply, but privately. They may look composed, but they feel an emotional pull they don't know how to handle. Nights become longer. Mornings become heavier. Memories sneak up in moments of stillness, driving, cooking, working, and they feel that pang of loss again and again. Their silence is not a sign of indifference, it is a shield. And while the world may interpret that shield as coldness, inside it is built from fear, regret, longing, and the overwhelming discomfort of feeling emotional pain they don't know how to express. For an avoidant person, loyalty from someone else affects them in a way they often don't know how to articulate. It feels like being handed something warm when their hands have only ever held cold things. On one hand, loyalty is soothing. It gives them a sense of stability they didn't grow up trusting. It makes them feel seen, valued, and understood in ways that feel new to their nervous system. But at the same time, that same loyalty can terrify them. Consistency means someone is sticking around long enough to get close, long enough to see the parts they've been hiding, and closeness to an avoidant doesn't feel natural. It feels risky. They've built their identity around independence, emotional self-reliance, and not needing anyone too deeply. So when someone loyal comes into their life and stays, it challenges everything they've used to keep themselves safe. They find themselves wanting connection, but fearing it at the same time. Loyalty pulls them in, but fear pushes them away. They might enjoy the comfort of having someone who doesn't leave at the first sign of difficulty, but they're also constantly waiting for the moment it all collapses. Trusting loyalty requires them to let their guard down, and letting their guard down feels like handing over armor they believe they need to survive. They fear that if they open the door even a little, everything inside will spill out. Neediness, vulnerability, longing, and they've spent years learning how to hide those parts. This creates a silent conflict inside them. When the loyal person is near, they feel a strange blend of peace and tension. They appreciate that this person isn't easily scared away, yet they can't shake the worry that one day their true selves might be too much or not enough. Loyalty exposes their fear of abandonment in the most unexpected way, not by threatening to leave, but by consistently staying. This confuses them. They don't know how to receive commitment without feeling a sense of impending loss. It's as if loyalty is a reminder of every moment they've been let down before, every time they needed someone and that need wasn't met. And because avoidants don't usually feel safe depending on others, they often misinterpret loyalty as pressure. They worry that the loyal person will expect the same level of openness and emotional availability from them, and they fear they won't be able to give it. They don't want to disappoint someone who believes in them. But instead of sharing this fear, they distance themselves, not out of lack of care, but out of panic. They're torn between wanting to show up and feeling incapable of doing so consistently. But beneath all the fear, loyalty touches them deeply. They notice the small ways the loyal person supports them. Patient conversations, understanding silences, acts of care that don't demand anything back. Even if they don't say it, these moments impact them. They may not express their appreciation openly, but they feel it. Loyalty becomes a soft place they don't know how to rest in, a kind of emotional warmth they didn't realize they were missing. And while it brings comfort, it also brings the terrifying possibility of being truly known. When a loyal person leaves an avoidant, regret quietly settles in, even if they never say it out loud. Avoidants are not usually accustomed to openly expressing their emotions, so their regret is internal, private, and often complicated. It isn't a sudden, explosive feeling. It creeps in slowly, like a shadow in the corners of their mind, revisiting every moment they wish they had acted differently. They replay conversations, analyze each word and pause, and ask themselves over and over why they didn't speak when it mattered most. They recognize the chances they took for granted, the words they withheld out of fear, and the closeness they avoided out of habit. The more loyal the person was, the sharper this reflection becomes. because loyal people give consistently, care unconditionally, and hold space for mistakes. Losing such a person makes an avoidant painfully aware of what they lost and the ways in which they contributed to that loss. Avoidants often experience regret in quiet, subtle ways. They might scroll through old messages late at night, not seeking to rekindle anything, but because it is the only place where vulnerability existed safely. They revisit memories of shared laughter, support, and the small gestures that showed care. Every moment where they kept their distance or withheld affection becomes a needle in their memory, reminding them of the person they failed to fully appreciate. They think about all the times they acted unbothered or detached, believing that keeping their emotions hidden protected them, but now they realize it may have cost them the relationship entirely. These reflections are internal, but they are deeply piercing, and the avoidance of outward expression often intensifies the pain. Another layer of regret comes from the recognition that they might never find someone as loyal again. Avoidants often underestimate the rarity of loyalty because their focus is on self-protection rather than on nurturing relationships. When the loyal person leaves, the avoidant is confronted with the irreplaceable value of what they had. They understand, sometimes too late, that their walls and distance, which once felt necessary for self-preservation, may have pushed away someone who was willing to stay through the storms. The regret grows because they realize that loyalty isn't just about staying, it's about enduring patience, understanding, and consistent care, qualities that are rarely encountered with such intensity. The guilt tied to this regret is also quietly suffocating. Avoidants struggle with feelings of shame for not expressing love adequately, for not being present emotionally, and for failing to meet the expectations of someone who believed in them without question. This internalized guilt doesn't manifest in confrontation or apology. It festers silently, often coloring their future interactions with others. They may overcompensate in subsequent relationships or pull back further to avoid repeating the same perceived mistakes, creating a cycle where regret continues to shape behavior. Ultimately, regret for an avoidant is a private, pervasive companion. It is not loud and it is rarely witnessed, but it is powerful. It is the quiet voice that reminds them of what they missed, the moments they could have cherished more fully, and the loyalty they failed to honor. It teaches them painfully that love withheld or avoided doesn't disappear. It leaves a lasting mark on both the heart and the soul. The loss of a loyal person often becomes a turning point for an avoidant, a moment where self-reflection begins whether they are ready for it or not. Avoidants spend much of their lives building walls around their emotions, convincing themselves that independence and emotional distance are the safest ways to live. They fear closeness because it makes them vulnerable, and vulnerability in their minds often leads to pain. But when someone loyal leaves, these carefully constructed walls are confronted with the undeniable reality of absence. For the first time, the avoidant may truly see the patterns they have created, the ways they protected themselves at the cost of meaningful connection, the ways they pushed people away just when love was becoming real. The loss forces them to question not just the departure of the loyal person, but their own role in creating the conditions for that departure. This self-realization often begins subtly. They may notice recurring thoughts, moments of reflection where they replay interactions and recognize behaviors they once considered necessary but now see as damaging. They realize that their habit of distancing, of shutting down when emotions grew too intense, wasn't a mark of strength. It was self-sabotage. They start to recognize the irony that the very walls they built to protect themselves ended up isolating them from someone who offered genuine care and constancy. It can be a painful awakening because it reveals not only their fear of intimacy, but also the cost of that fear in the form of lost loyalty, lost trust, and lost potential for deep connection. Avoidants may also begin to understand the subtle ways they contributed to the loss. They notice the moments where avoidance took priority over communication, where emotional unavailability replaced presence, and where fear disguised itself as independence. These realizations are often accompanied by a sense of regret, but they are different from simple sadness. This is a deeper, more reflective kind of awareness. A recognition that personal patterns and unresolved fears were active agents in the dissolution of the relationship. For an avoidant, seeing these patterns for what they are can be a moment of both discomfort and growth, as it challenges the narratives they've used to justify emotional distance for so long. The absence of the loyal person also teaches them about the nature of vulnerability. Avoidants often see vulnerability as dangerous, but losing someone who loved them unconditionally illuminates its value. They start to understand that opening up does not always result in pain, and that avoiding emotional risks sometimes means missing out on profound love and connection. This realization can be unsettling because it requires them to rethink long-held beliefs about protection, independence, and emotional safety. In many cases, this forced self-awareness becomes the catalyst for change. Avoidants may begin to explore new ways of showing up in relationships, slowly learning that being seen, being vulnerable, and taking emotional risks are essential parts of connection. While the pain of loss remains, it transforms into a teacher, guiding them to recognize the difference between protection and self-imposed isolation. Through this introspection, avoidants can start to approach relationships differently, carrying forward the lessons learned from losing someone who was loyal and irreplaceable and applying them to the possibility of healthier connections in the future. The hidden pain that avoidants carry after losing someone loyal can ultimately become a powerful catalyst for growth, even if it is not immediately apparent. Avoidants have spent much of their lives mastering the art of emotional self-protection, convincing themselves that detachment, distance, and independence are the safest ways to navigate relationships. They rarely express vulnerability, and when someone leaves, they often internalize their grief rather than show it. Yet this very pain, the quiet ache that no one sees, contains lessons that can shape their future emotional lives in profound ways. Losing someone loyal forces them to confront the consequences of their avoidance, highlighting the cost of keeping their emotions locked away. In this confrontation lies an opportunity for transformation if they are willing to look inward with honesty and courage. One of the first steps toward growth is recognition. Avoidants may begin to notice patterns in their own behavior that they previously ignored or rationalized. They see how emotional distance, fear of dependence, and discomfort with vulnerability contributed to the loss. This recognition can be uncomfortable because it challenges the narratives they have used to protect themselves. They may feel guilt, shame, or regret, but these feelings are also a mirror, reflecting truths about how they interact with others and revealing areas where change is necessary. By acknowledging these truths, avoidants gain the awareness needed to make different choices in the future. Choices that involve greater presence, emotional availability, and attentiveness in relationships. The hidden pain also teaches patience with themselves. Avoidants are often hard on themselves for their emotional patterns, judging their inability to express feelings as a weakness. Yet through the experience of loss, they may begin to understand that their avoidance was a coping mechanism, a strategy developed to protect themselves from hurt. Recognizing this allows them to approach their own growth with compassion rather than criticism. They begin to see that transformation does not happen overnight, and that learning to engage with vulnerability is a gradual process. The pain of losing someone loyal serves as a reminder that growth often arises from discomfort, and that true emotional change requires both courage and self-compassion. Another critical aspect of growth comes from understanding the value of loyalty and consistency in relationships. Avoidants may have taken these qualities for granted while the loyal person was present, but their absence highlights how rare and precious such love can be. This insight can motivate avoidants to cultivate these qualities in themselves and to seek connections where mutual care, patience, and commitment are honored. Over time, this awareness can shift how they engage in relationships, encouraging them to show up more fully, communicate openly, and embrace vulnerability rather than fear it. Finally, the pain hidden from the world can become a source of emotional resilience. Avoidants learn that even when love is lost, they can survive and reflect, gaining wisdom from their experiences. The grief they carry becomes a teacher, illuminating the patterns to avoid, the behaviors to change, and the ways to connect more meaningfully in the future. In this way, hidden pain is not merely a burden, it is a guide. It challenges avoidants to face themselves honestly, to break cycles of avoidance, and to approach future relationships with greater awareness, courage, and emotional depth. Through this process, what once felt like a loss can transform into an opportunity for profound personal growth and the development of a more authentic, connected way of living. In the end, the hidden pain that avoidants carry after losing someone loyal is a powerful reminder that love, loss, and self-reflection are deeply intertwined. While their grief may be silent, it holds lessons about vulnerability, growth, and the true value of connection. By facing their patterns, understanding their fears, and learning from the loss, they have the opportunity to show up differently in future relationships with greater presence, compassion, and emotional courage. Thank you all for listening and allowing yourselves to reflect on the complexity of love, the impact of loyalty, and the quiet strength it takes to grow from loss.